Hello, tribe, and welcome to another episode of Faye Jones Life Podcast. This is your host, Faye Jones, and today we're talking about Pride Unmasked Part 2. We are kicking off where we left off. We were talking about the covert signs of pride, and we left off on quick to judge. So we're going to jump right in without too much introduction or anything to that podcast. So if you have not listened to the first part of the podcast, I'm going to encourage you to go listen to that first and then jump on to this one. Because like I said, I'm not doing an introduction to it. We're just going to jump right in. So we left off with quick to judge. Now let's continue with this part of the podcast. And it is exaggerating accomplishments. That's another covert sign of pride. And what does this look like? It is overemphasizing one's achievements while minimizing and ignoring the contribution of others. And this is really important because some people like to think that they're self-made, that they never had anybody help them on their journey, that they did it on their own. And while we don't negate the fact that every single person who has achieved success has had to put some personal effort of their own in work ethic and dedication and sacrifice, there has been other people along the way that have come to help them. Like for instance, me being able to do this podcast, me being able to dedicate so much time to pour into you, it is not something that I'm able to do on my own strength. Number one, I need God. God, Holy Spirit are the ones who are guiding me, giving me the topics to cover in these podcasts and the strength and the energy to do it. Number two, I have my husband and my children who support me and graciously, when I'm recording these podcasts, do their best to keep the house really quiet. And sometimes if I'm doing these recordings at night, my husband very gracefully is okay with me not going to bed at the same time as him in order for me to get this done. I couldn't do it without the people who support Faye Jones Life, either by purchasing our products, subscribing to our services, or those who just genuinely give a gift in order for me to continue to carry on this message. So while, yes, I am putting the effort, I am the one who's doing the research and the studying and getting these podcasts out to you. I'm the one who does the life coaching and different things like that. There is a tremendous amount of people in the background that are contributing in one way or another to help me succeed in this journey. And if we're unwilling to admit that and to recognize that, then we're prideful because no one person can do it alone. We really can't, because God is right there helping us with everything. Extreme independence. That's another sign of pride right there. And while independence can be a positive trait, because we don't want to say that independence is negative, because we don't want to try to, celebrate codependency. But it becomes a negative trait when everybody tries to do everything on their own with no support or collaboration from others. At some point, you're going to have to ask help. At some point, you're going to have other people collaborate with you, teach you things, coach you, join you on the journey. For instance, you might start as a solopreneur, but at some point, you're going to have to bring people on the team to help you with different things, because as you continue to grow and scale, you won't be able to do it on your own. So you might hire an accountant, you may hire somebody to do social media, you may hire somebody to do customer service, those kind of things. That is completely normal. If you're a new parent and now all of a sudden you have young children and you're stressed out and you need a nap, you'll hire a babysitter, or you'll talk to a family member and say, hey, can you watch these kids for a little bit? Because I am so exhausted. I've been sleep deprived. I haven't been able to rest. And I don't know how much longer I can go on. And you get some help. But if you try to do it all on your own, guess what? It's going to become really hard for you. But it's also, it is also a covert sign of pride. Diminishing or neglecting praises for others. And what does that look like? What does diminishing the praise for others? And it's really interesting because I just experienced this recently, where a person paid a compliment or what seemed like a compliment or a good wish towards me, and then turned around and said, "Oh, yeah, that'll be difficult, but I guess, God to God, it's not impossible." It's like, well, thanks for the vote of confidence. And that's what that looks like. It's when we give somebody a compliment or we minimize somebody's accomplishment and we change the subject, or we begin by giving what sounds like a praise, but we counter it with either a story of our own success or by injecting something negative to diminish the success, the the person, their accomplishment, or the compliment we just gave, or the praise that we just gave. So I hope that's made it very clear. Um, and that could be something like, "Man, I did so good. You should have seen me. I I did a mile in 30 minutes. That's my best number ever." And here you come. "Oh, congratulations. That's so amazing. I'm so glad you did your mile in 30 minutes. I just finished a mile today. I did it in 5 minutes." Way to squash the other person, ain't it? You don't want to do that. Always having the last word. We know this one. You got to have the final say in a discussion, an argument, and it'll even cross into having a lack of respect for another person or their perspective. And I want to give a caveat on this because there is people with whom you're going to have to set boundaries, and you're going to have to say, "You know what? I understand where you're coming from, but period, end of story. This is what I said, and that settles it." Like, for instance, if your child is saying, "Mom, I want to go to Johnny's house and spend the night for 4 days. And in the 4 days, Johnny and I are going to go on a road trip together, and we're going to go to Vegas, Mom." But Johnny is 16 years old. And I think it's safe to say 16-year-olds unsupervised for 4 days on a road trip to Vegas is asking for trouble. So you're like, "No." Johnny's like, "Oh, Mom, but it'd be such a cool experience, and I mean, I'm really good. I don't need a chaperone. You already know, and that I'm gonna do good. That I'm gonna be respectful. That I'm gonna obey." And all this stuff, "Mom, you should tell me." And they keep insisting, and they keep bringing different point of views. And you're going to be like, "Look, Johnny, end of story. If there is not a responsible adult that's going to be accompanying you guys all 4 of those days, you're not going anywhere. And if you bring up the topic one more time, you're grounded." That's kind of how that works, right? But so there is those times where you're going to have the last word. You're going to have to be like, "End of story." Or let's say you're on social media and you're discussing a topic and the person keeps wanting to take it off topic, into stuff that you clearly know will get toxic and go down a rabbit hole that is not beneficial for anyone. You may choose to say, "I understand your point of view and where you're coming from. However, that is not the topic of the conversation at hand. The topic of the conversation at hand is XYZ. So unless you're willing to stick to this topic, then we're going to have to end the conversation right here. Now, if you want to address this topic, this other topic of yours, we can do that at a different time on a different post, or you're welcome to inbox me and we can continue that conversation in private." So yes, there are times you're going to have the last word in order to not let things get out of hand and become toxic and messy and all of those things. But that's not what this is referring to. This is referring to the person that knows that they're in the wrong, or they knows they have incomplete information, or they just want to be right no matter what. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it from anybody else. They don't want, they won't tolerate something different being said. That's what this looks like. And so they will keep rehashing it, because they want to have that last word. They want to be the one to win the argument, because with them, the goal is not understanding, which is the purpose of communication. Their only goal is communicating to win. Excessive criticism of others. Oh, that fault finding spirit, where that person regularly finds the faults in others while never acknowledging their own shortcomings. That is most definitely pride. This is why, for some of you, it may seem uncomfortable, because sometimes I can be uncomfortably transparent, and I will share personal stories about my own failures and moments where I missed the mark. But I'm doing that for a reason, because I need you to know that I'm not perfect. I need you to know that when I'm addressing these issues, it's not because I'm being critical or judgmental, but rather because I've been there and I've experienced the heartache and the frustration and the calamity that comes from falling into those pitfalls. And I'm advising you on that so that you don't repeat the same pattern. And there's a difference. There's a difference in that. It gains us nothing. Especially, hear me out, church folks, hear me out, preachers, to pretend like we have it all together, like we have never fallen short of the glory of God, like we have never sinned, like we have never mistaken, like we have never struggled, like we have never dealt with our sinful nature and our flesh, and try to pretend like we're perfect, like we're holier than thou, like we've never had doubt or any of those things. It serves us nothing to adopt that attitude. We need to be able to be vulnerable with people and say, you know what? If I'm talking to you about how sex out of marriage is not a good idea, I'm not saying this because I'm some prude who doesn't want to have fun. I'm actually talking to you because I went buck wild, and I used to be the one who used to think it was fun. But then let me share with you the baggage that led to. Many relationships where I wasn't valued because I was looked at as an object for pleasure rather than a human being with feelings and emotions that deserved respect. And of course, that person couldn't respect me because I didn't respect myself. That led to a lot of emotional baggage, depression, low self-esteem, and it even led to even feeling suicidal, feelings of worthlessness, and making decisions that were detrimental to me simply because it left such a void that then, rather than seeking healthy relationship and setting boundaries with myself and with others and discovering my self-worth, I started begging for love and attention. Sex is not the thing that you give somebody until they have made a commitment to love you, to cherish you, to respect you, to protect you. And that commitment is not an engagement ring or a promise ring. That commitment is marriage. When they say we're ride or die till the end, then that person gets access to your body and gets to connect with you in the most intimate ways. And let me tell you, because I'm now on the other side and I am married, I can tell you that you do want it that way. Because now, when you're with the right person and you're married to the right person, a person who respects you, who loves you, and who honors you, that person's going to treat you right. That person's not going to violate you. That person's not going to force you to do things you don't want to do. That person sees being able to enjoy you in the most intimate ways as a privilege, not a right. It's quite more enjoyable and more beautiful that way. And y'all, I wasn't just saying that to be a dialogue. That is the truth. That is part of my story. That is part of my life. And so that's why I can so candidly say that, because I know what that pitfall looks like. So when I say sex before marriage, not a good idea. Shacking up with somebody who you ain't married to, not a good idea. That is why I'm saying it. You're opening your heart, you're opening your spirit up to a whole lot of mess. A whole lot of mess. Not to mention that whatever demonic spirits and other things that person's dealing with, Now you just opened yourself up to partake of them. And sometimes after you engage, um, sexually with somebody, you don't feel like yourself. Of course, you don't feel like yourself. You just, sex is it's not just a physical act, but it's a spiritual act. And in that moment of intimacy, you're the most vulnerable and the most open. And if you're sharing that with just anybody, you just open yourself spiritually to anything and everything. And you've now became one with all sorts of spirits and things in the spiritual realm that you don't even know. And that's why some of you are experiencing all kinds of situations, because you have opened those doors and you have allowed things to come in. You have partnered with things in the name of pleasure, in the name of filling the void, in the name of feeling like arm candy, like your hot stuff. Ladies, set the bar higher. Men, set the bar higher. People reluctant to celebrate small wins. Some people think that the only things worth celebrating are the big things, the big wins. For instance, you won the lottery and you won $1 million. Because that's the thing that's successful and worthwhile. That's the thing that everybody's going to notice and all that. We don't learn to celebrate the little things, the things that may seem insignificant. Like you successfully finally grew a tomato plant. It took you 3 years, but you finally did it and you got 1 tomato. Woohoo! That is worth celebrating. You drank 10 cups of water today and you don't even like water. That's something worth celebrating. It may not be huge. It may not be $1 million contract. It may not be, lifestyle of the rich and famous, but it's worth celebrating. And this is why you'll constantly see me, it's the little things, like the sunset. It's the little things, like the little bees sitting on the roses. And you celebrate all those little things. You know why I celebrate all those little things? Because life is a miracle. We do not have the ability to command our eyes, our lungs, our internal organs to continue to work while we sleep. We are unaware of what's going on with our body while we're sleeping. We're completely checked out. It is God who keeps everything running and working while we sleep. So the fact that we get to open up our eyes every morning and we can see, that we can use our body and move, that all of our organs work like they're supposed to, that we can touch and feel and walk, stand, eat, taste, all those things. Those are all incredible miracles. Before you even walk out of your bedroom each morning, you have unwrapped many gifts. So celebrate everything, because everything is a miracle. Everything is a gift from God. Everything. Not acknowledging the role of God and favor. You see, some people attribute their successes solely to their own abilities, ignoring the role of God and the favor that God gave during the circumstances. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. And I'm going to use myself so that we are not, what can I say? So that we are not creating situations and scenarios for other people. I'm using myself as an example. Back in college, getting a degree that God asked me to go get, which I'm very happy to do because it's actually a topic that I absolutely love. And in the whole process of this, my previous college experiences and academic experiences period weren't all that great. When I say I was the CDF student, I really mean it. I'm not exaggerating. If we were to call those institutions and pull up my report cards, you will see that. The only things I excelled was things that had to do with my hand, vocational things. And I'm not knocking vocational, because if you know me, I'm all about that vocational. Everything from, web and graphic designs and making jewelry and 3D printing and doing things with my hands. I paint, I draw, all these things, culinary arts. I'm all for that. I'm also a nail tech and and a cosmetologist, and I taught other nail techs as a nail technician instructor for a while. So I'm not knocking it. I love vocational. I'm saying that because some of y'all are going to try to get defensive, and I'm trying to reel you from not even going there. Academic was something that I struggled with, partly because, since I was very young, I was diagnosed with dyslexia and dyscalculia and all the other things that are associated with dyslexia. So there were some challenges with learning everything from reading, writing, spelling. All of those things were a challenge to the point where I even had to go to therapy to learn how to write. And because it wasn't just the penmanship issue, but it was also the fact that I would write from right to left, and I was writing from right to left all the way across multiple pages before I would go back to the next line and different things like that. So there was a lot of things that I had to get trained on. So needless to say, academia was always a challenge for me. So I was a little concerned about this time around, and I said, okay, God, there's been a lot of healing that you've done in my life and everything. So if you're calling me to do this, I am believing that you've also healed my mind and those part of my brain that had difficulty with academia and grasping different challenges. So I went into college saying, I have the mind of Christ. And because I have the mind of Christ, I can do all things. I can learn all things. Nothing is beyond my level of understanding because I have the mind of Christ. And guess what? I've made both the dean list and the president's list. That's honor roll. And why am I saying this? I could sit here and tell you that it was all in my strength, that I was the one who accomplished this all by myself. But the truth of the matter is that the reason that I'm so successful in this venture now is because I have the mind of Christ. Because God did a great work in me as He was healing me from trauma and so many other things that I was going through, that now I am able to thrive. And that, my friends, that's what it's all about. That is exactly what it is all about. And so I can't credit that to my own strengths and my own abilities. Yes, I'm putting in the work and I'm studying, I'm reading, I'm writing this stuff, I'm doing the work. But I have to recognize that there's an element of favor and there's an element of God working on my mind and connecting me to His mind that is allowing me to succeed at something that I have over 40 years track record of not being able to succeed in. Being unforgiving, holding grudges. You feel like you're above the other person who wronged you because you didn't wrong them. Guess what? We've all wronged somebody. We're all the villain in somebody else's story. So being unforgiving and holding a grudge against somebody, the only thing you're doing is hurting yourself. Denial of personal weakness. You see, the reason so many of us are struggling with things is because we lack that self-awareness, because we don't want to acknowledge that we have weaknesses. Yet the scripture says, when I am weak, He, referring to God, to Jesus, He is strong in me. So if we are unwilling to acknowledge we have weaknesses, we're essentially saying we don't need God. When we try to portray an image that we're flawless, then why do we need God? See, I have no problem telling you, and I've shared that with you guys in other podcasts. There's certain people, both family members as well as, friends from the past, that I don't associate with. And it's not because I'm this high and mighty, amazing person. No, it's because I know my weaknesses. I am very self-aware. I know what are the areas that if I'm not careful and I let my guard down, my love for those people will override good judgment. And before you know it, I'm making decisions out of character that could jeopardize my relationship with God, my salvation, and my future. And because I'm unwilling to pay that price, I much rather pay the price of not associating with those individuals or having them in my life. Do I love them? Yes. If I know they're in need and they need help with something, would I help them? Absolutely. But would they be a part of my inner circle? No. Will I be spending time with them regularly? No. Not because I'm better than them, but because I understand that there's certain areas in me that are weak. And so I need to not open the door to it, period. This is where the Apostle Paul said, do not think higher of yourself than you ought to. You got to know what level you're at, what you can handle and what you can't handle, what level of maturity you have. We all have to do that. Making excuses for personal mistakes or failures rather than owning them, that's pride. So rather than taking ownership for our actions and the results, we blame circumstances or other people, bad luck, anything to avoid taking responsibility. That's pride. Overconfidence, person making decisions or taking actions without considering all the facts or possibilities, believing they can't possibly be wrong. And don't get me wrong, look, a lot of us, we have been overconfident more than once, and we have made decisions that then all of a sudden we're like, oh God, what did I get myself into? I bit off more than I can chew. And God in his infinite mercy steps in and brings solution to that issue so that big old foot in the mouth thing we did because of our overconfidence doesn't destroy us. But the fact that God steps in and helps us is his infinite mercy and not because he has obligated to. And so we have to get to that place where we're not making those kind of decisions all the time that leads to God having to put us in check. We need to get to that place where we live in such a way that we seek wisdom, we seek guidance, we seek understanding, so that when God, we don't have to be in those overconfidence, cocky situations that then we need God to bail us out of. So we need to recognize that in ourselves. Just because God bailed us out once or twice doesn't mean he's obligated to. So here's the thing. If he doesn't and he allows us to deal with the consequences of our actions, we can't be mad at God. We have to be mad at ourselves because we violated principles of God. We were prideful. We didn't seek guidance. We didn't seek his wisdom. We did what we wanted to do and then expected him to bail us out. Excessive competitiveness. You know, it's good to have a level of competition. It's okay. It's okay to be a little bit competitive. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when we get to that point where we have to win at all cost, even when we're wrong. And we've all seen that. We've even seen that in some of our more recent politicians, very public figures, where they refuse to admit fault, they refuse to admit wrong. We see that in our churches today. We see that everywhere. We've done it. We have all been guilty at some point of doing that. Poor listeners. That means the only thing you do is you talk about yourself, you interrupt others, don't pay attention. Those are all covert signs of pride. And when I say don't pay attention is you don't pay attention to other people when they're talking. The only time you pay attention is when it's you talking. And in the minute that somebody else starts to talk or that somebody else starts to say something, your brain goes into wah 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 wah. And then you wait until they're done talking, and then you go off talking about what you wanted to talk about that may be completely off topic, and you completely disregarded anything and everything that person had to say. That is pride, because you believe your story is more important than the other person's. Gotta be a good listener. We all have to be good listeners. And believe it or not, I know some of you say, oh, Faye, you're a really good listener. I love talking to you. Because what? I still have to work on this because sometimes I'm not. That's my children and my husband. Sometimes I'm not. And even in coaching, sometimes, the people I'm coaching will say something, and I feel like, I want, I know the answer to this. I need to say this, and I have to catch myself and say, let them finish what they have to say, acknowledge what they have to say, respond to that, and then bring in this other layer. It's a lifelong process. You will always be learning how to communicate, how to listen, because listening is part of communication. Resisting authority. Ooh, Lord Jesus. Lord Jesus. Resisting authority, where you feel like you are above, needing direction, and your way is better. It is impossible to succeed if you're unwilling to get help and to get direction from those who are above you and who have succeeded at the thing that you're trying to succeed at. If you think your way is better, then you're not going to get it at all. And caveat in that, because I'm not saying ignore your expertise. If you have a certain area where you're an expert at and you know that in that particular area you bring something to the table that is better and is more effective, not just efficient, but effective than what's being done, then by all means, bring that to the attention. If they don't want to use it, don't get mad if they don't want to use it. You use it for you. But at the same time, don't diminish their knowledge, their skills, their expertise, because they also bring things to the table. There's room for everybody to share and collaborate. You take the good, discard the bad. Sense of entitlement. And this is where you believe that you deserve special treatment or you should be exempt from certain standards. And then you show resentment when somebody doesn't give you those standards or those privileges that you think you deserve. Insensitive to the needs of others. And this is somebody who doesn't consider how their actions are going to affect others. That's a sign of pride. And narcissists are, man, this is narcissists live by this. This is their anthem. They don't care about how their actions are going to affect you. They only care about what it is that they want and what they're going to get out of it. They have no problem hurting you or destroying you. They just consider you a casualty of war. Because to them, their desires and their needs are more important than anything and anyone else. We need to be careful not to fall into that. Ingratitude. Somebody who doesn't show genuine gratitude, who cannot express thanksgiving. And look, we're not saying go around for the rest of your life sucking up to somebody who did something good for you and like worshiping the ground that they walk on. What we are saying is show gratitude. So if somebody gives you this bottle, are you able to say thank you for the glass of water? Thank you because that's helping me tremendously. Now I can be hydrated. Or you just treat it like whatever. You gotta say thank you. And here's a big one. Overemphasis in status symbols. And this means constantly needing to display whatever that status symbol is. For example, your expensive car, high-end fashion, other luxuries. That's a covert sign of pride. Because what we're doing when we do this is these symbols make us feel validated in our self-worth and maybe even superiority. And that's what we show it, like I'm better than you and all this stuff like that. Now, caveat on that. Some people really do live that lifestyle. Like some people really are very, very affluent. They can have the ability to shop and eat and live in certain places that are luxurious and that are high end. So if a person's taking a picture of themselves eating breakfast at their house because they're like, hey, look at this, look at my avocado toast. But it just so happens that their avocado toast is in a really nice plate with gold trim on it, on a marble table, and the glass is made out of like this really expensive, crystal, and their window overlooks, it's actually a glass wall, and it overlooks the ocean, and they take a picture and you see all of that in the picture, and that is genuinely how they live. Understand they're not staging anything. Understand they're not trying to show off anything. That is genuinely their life. That is how they live. So they can't pretend to do something else. They're not going to give you paper plates pictures on a, you know, $20 Goodwill table, because those objects are not in their home. That's not how they live. Now, when it's something that somebody does occasionally, like, let's say you work for a Fortune 500 company and you are in charge of sales, and you made a sales quota, and so the company says, as a bonus, rather than making you fly coach, we are going to charter a private jet for you, and we're going to fly you to the next destination where you're going to be doing additional work and some sales training for our associates. But we're going to fly you in this private jet. We're going to give you the experience, and we're going to rent a luxury car for you to drive while you're there. And it is just a one-time thing. You know, it's a one-off thing that they're doing for you because you excel so great. And now what you do is, during that whole week, you decide to schedule a photo shoot, and you take photographies in this really nice hotel or this really nice Airbnb that the company's paying for you, in the jet, and different poses and all this stuff inside the jet, outside the jet, with the luxury car that they rented for you, and with that whole experience. And now you've got, like, you took like 5,000 photos, and you did like 30,000 changes of outfits so that it would look like different times and different scenarios and things, all so that you can have now, 6 months, a year's worth of social media content portraying a life that's not really what you live. Because when we come down to the reality, you drive a Yugo. For those of you who are millennials or younger and don't know what a Yugo is, it's a really old car, came out in the 80s and 90s, and it's kind of about the same size of the 1990s Ford Festiva. It was a very budget economy car. But so you drive a Yugo, you live in a bedroom that you rent. You're not even in your own apartment or your own house. You rent a room in somebody else's home, and you don't even know where your next meal is going to come from. That is a problem, because what you're doing is you're overemphasizing a status symbol. But number one, it's not really who you are. It is not really how you live. In order to portray a certain level of superiority and to validate yourself. But guess what? You're never going to feel validated, because it's not your life. You're faking it till you make it. And these are all signs of pride. You don't want people to know that you rent a room in somebody else's house. You don't want people to know that you drive a Yugo. You don't want people to know that you don't know where your next meal is going to come from. That's a problem. How about we cast down that? And this is the reason why this is happening, because we have a lot of people doing that on social media. And so, and we can blame the Instagrams of the world for that, because it's all about opulence and just living this very luxurious life, and everybody's just trying to show off the best of the best of the best of the best. And so now there's this FOMO going on, fear of missing out, and people are trying to live up to something that is not their life. How about showing off that little Yugo, and instead sharing the blessing of what it means for you to have that piece of transportation? And then things change and you get upgraded to something better. How about sharing with people, thank you, God. Look at where God brought me from. When we were in the process of building our home, man, I remember we shared so many pictures of everything, like, because we were here from the moment the foundation was just dirt. There was nothing to it. It was just a lot with dirt. And they started to put the rebar for the foundation, pour in the concrete, the whole process. We shared it with our loved ones, and we shared pictures and everything. And one thing that I remember telling people is, when you see this, don't get jealous, don't get envious. I'm not sharing this to rub it in your face. I am sharing this because I want to give you hope. I want to encourage you that your blessing is coming. When we had lost everything in 2008, we had to wait 12 years to be able to get back into that moment of we're building our home from scratch. And it was a process. I want to tell people, what God promised, He will deliver. The things that God said will come to pass. We were happy with a house that was already built and, quick moving, but God willed it that we had a brand new house built just for us, where we were the only ones to have ever lived in it. And He gave us the privilege and the blessing of watching it go up from scratch. And I'm here to tell you, when we shared that, I was telling people, look, don't feel jealous. We can just believe your blessing, your breakthrough, your things coming. People celebrate it with us. It's a house, and they celebrate all the other little things that came on. When we got our cars, and let's just say, my cars aren't not luxurious in any way. I drive Hyundais. I love Hyundais. I think they're a great car, and I'm very happy with them. And believe me, I test drove a lot of different cars, and I said, no, Hyundai's the one for me. I'm not an affiliate of Hyundai, guys, so I'm not trying to give them a plug or nothing like that. It's just genuinely, we like them. And shared picture maybe once or twice on social media. And I'd say, I'm thankful. And every day that I go out in that garage and I look at those cars, I thank God every day for them. Because I know what it's like to drive hoopties. And I know what it's like to have cars that you have to wrench on them every day in order to be able to get to work and to get from point A to point B. I know what it's like to get stranded in the middle of the road, in the middle of a busy intersection with your vehicle, and you praying to God that somebody will come to help you move that vehicle out of the way before it causes an accident. I know what being in that is like. So when God blesses and prospers us to the next level, where I'm like, shoot, I'm encouraging people, like, look at what God did, yo. Your blessings coming. Don't worry about it. I'm encouraging. And when people get their blessings, I celebrate with them. Because you know what? There's a price that had to be paid for them to be able to enjoy that blessing. What makes us think that if I had to pay a price for my blessing, and we're not talking about money here, we're talking about the price of going through those seasons where we were living in an apartment with paper thin walls and neighbors who were doing drugs and in domestic violence and all kinds of other craziness, to have the peace of a roof over our own head, that's our house, where we can really control the environment, we're not sharing walls with anybody. That's the price that was paid to get here. A price of several years of renting from not very great landlords. But we still did our best to take care of their homes like if they were ours, while we rebuilt and got ourselves to where we're at now. That was the price that me and my family had to pay to be where we're at today. For some of you, the price you're paying may be you were homeless for a while. Maybe you were living in your car for a while. Everybody pays a different price. If I had to pay a price, I need to know that the person who has something and just received the blessing, they also had to pay a price. So rather than being jealous and feeling all kinds of weird and having to try to fake it till I make it, to level up, to try to outdo them, maybe it's better to go, hey, what's your story? What was the price that you had to pay to get where you're at? Pride can lead us to uncontrolled appetites. And it will lead us to making alliances that lead to our destruction. I want you to let that sink in. Pride leads to uncontrolled appetites that lead to our destruction. Because we'll make alliances with people, places, and things that don't have our best interest at hand. Now that we've wrapped up what are the covert signs of pride, let's go ahead and we're going to move forward to the next episode. And in the next episode, we are going to do our best to wrap it up. This might be a part 3. There might be a part 4 to this. But on this particular note of overemphasis on status symbol, and we talked about how that leads to using symbols of luxury or whatever to validate us or make us feel more important and everything, and how that can lead us to having uncontrolled appetites and making alliances that lead to our destruction. I want to encourage you, if you haven't done so yet, listen to podcast episode number 6, which talks about how appetites shape our decision making, because this is so important. Our pride and uncontrolled appetites, because of unhealed things, lead to our destruction. And this podcast that I did, episode 6, really ties in well with this point. So that's another layer that you want to dive into. But I want to go over these really quick. We're just gonna recap the points that we covered today, as far as the continuation of the covert signs of pride. We said we are exaggerating accomplishments, extreme independence, diminishing or neglecting to give others praise, always having the last word, excessive criticism of others, reluctant to celebrate small wins, not acknowledging God or God's favor in a circumstance, being unforgiving, denial of personal weaknesses, making excuses, being overconfident, excessive competitiveness, being a poor listener, resisting authority, a sense of entitlement, insensitivity to the needs of others, ingratitude, and overemphasis on status symbols. So replay this, make some notes. This is not an episode that I will say you listen to it once and that's it. These are episodes you want to listen to it multiple times. Take your time to write some notes. Examine yourself in the process so that you can really work on this. You want to identify what signs of pride are operating in you. Because again, this is not about identifying pride in others. It's about identifying the pride in ourselves so that we can break free from those things. We can repent, we can break free from them, we can start to change. And don't worry, I'm not just gonna say like, oh, here's the signs of pride, now figure it out. I'm going to give you some practical steps, some principles so that you can ensure that anytime pride rears its head, you can annihilate that out of your life so that you can live in humility before God, so that you don't have to deal with the consequences of pride. So with that said, we'll see you in the next episode. Until next time, God bless. Have a great day.